station, Adventist Reflections. Now, to discuss character building ideas, here is your host, Dr. Danzy.
Hi family, welcome back to the Adventist Reflections podcast. Today is lesson 12, which is titled, To Love Mercy. Let me share with you a quote from the book, My Life Today, which in page 53 it says, No member of the family can enclose himself within himself, where other members of the family shall not feel his influence and spirit. The very expression of the countenance has an influence for good or evil. His spirits, his words, his actions, his attitude towards others are unmistakable. If he is filled with the love of Christ, he will manifest courtesy, kindness, tender regard for the feeling of others, and he will communicate to his associates by his acts of love and tender, grateful, happy feeling. It will be made manifest that he is living for Jesus. He will be able to say to the Lord, Thy gentleness hath made me great. So today I would like us to reflect on two aspects. Number one, the tension, maybe there's a tension, I don't know, but the tension between the kingdom and the practical needs of people. And number two, ministry fatigue. And to unpack these ideas, I welcome back again Catalina. Catalina, how are you going today?
I'm well. I'm blessed.
You're blessed. Awesome. That's amazing. I'm blessed too. Thank you for
putting this thing to you.
Yes. Remember, guys, hashtag I'm blessed. Just make it viral. I'll put the hashtag on all of the posts that we do now. And that will follow until Jesus Christ comes.
Yeah.
So,
amen. The
kingdom versus the need here and now. And let me unpack a bit because maybe this is puzzling everybody who is listening right now. What is he talking about? What are they talking about? Matthew 6:25-33. We're not going to read it, but you go ahead and read it if you have time. If you're driving, don't do that whenever you stop. But Matthew 6:25-33 says, God looks after all his creation. I'm summarizing. He says, he looks after the little birds. He looks after the flowers. Everything is looked after by him. And the passage concludes that those who worry about all these practical needs are actually the wicked. And the followers of Christ should not worry at all about their physical needs because God has them all covered up. He covered them all. And then God says, but seek ye the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all those physical needs will be met by the sufferer. They will be added unto you. We all know that kind of passage at the end. This is the question that I have. This is the one idea that I would like us to reflect on. Because the lesson is encouraging us to love mercy and to be merciful and to pass that mercy on. We've been talking about this whole idea for the past 11 lessons about passing on God's mercy and justice. But there are two things here. If we are not to worry about our physical needs, if we are not to worry about being hungry, about needing clothing, shelter, etc., because God covers such needs, why do we have to worry about doing such stuff ourselves? Why do I have to worry about meeting somebody else's needs? Isn't that God's job? What do you think?
So I think it's a really challenging question. And when, you sent through the study notes, I thought to myself, I'm like, wow, that is such a good question. I think we have to put it in the context of what is our purpose here as Christians. Is it just to be very content and satisfied we've got salvation and we have a God that will provide all our needs? And I think yes. But as a result, I think God continues to give us a tenderness and to be very sensitive to other people's suffering. And when we see people suffering, it will only move us to action. I know people that have no religious beliefs. And I say this, they've never read a Bible, they've never gone to church, and they've never said a prayer. And they are very sensitive to helping people that are suffering. You have, organizations that are dedicated to helping children that are suffering, to helping people that are suffering from drug and substance abuse. You have organizations that even take care of animals. there's a sensitivity towards suffering. And if people that don't understand the pain that people are going through on a deeper spiritual level can take action and help to ease that, I would only expect more from Christians who completely comprehend the impact of sin and how much it grieves God to see his children suffering. So I think that it is just part of having a little bit of a glimpse of what God suffers in seeing his children suffer, that we would then want to practically do that. But I really liked that passage, and obviously because I'm looking at it through ministry eyes and I have my ministry filter. But also I think for Christians, God is saying, don't worry that you can't minister to people because you have to provide for yourself. All I need you to do is to go and seek the kingdom of God and to present the kingdom of God, and all the rest of it, I'll add on to it. So be Christ-like, seek righteousness, then share that, and then don't worry about the food and the clothing and everything else. I will provide for that just like I provide for the rest of creation. But I just need you to seek my kingdom first. So on a ministry level, I feel that God is reminding us that, yeah, we can be a little reluctant, or maybe we can be hesitant or worried about dedicating certain amounts of time to ministry because we need to go work, or we need to go do things that provide for us physically, and therefore I can't go out to outreach, or I can't go out to visit, or I can't go out to do a Bible study because it just takes up too much of my time. I think God's reminding us that, you know what, take the time for that and I'll sort out the rest.
I like what you're saying. Recently, and I didn't plan to say this, it just come into my mind as a reminder as you're speaking about this, because during our prayer meeting locally, our pastor delivered an expository explanation of the verse related to ministering to the least of these. And as you know, our pastor, he did a really good job at it. And he talked exactly what you're talking about. The idea that, you know, we put that verse out of context, and throughout the whole lesson we've been doing this. Because what Jesus Christ intended, what he was trying to convey when he said those things about ministering to the least of these, he was talking about his disciples. He's saying, hey, you know, if you minister to those who I have sent forth to do my work, because I sent them and I said to them, don't worry about your clothes, don't worry about your food, don't worry about anything. Just go ahead and do your job, minister, tell them about me. And he said, you know, those who are blessed, those who will be rewarded will be those when he's talking about when did we clothe them when they were naked, when did we feed them when they were hungry, when do we visit them in jail? He's saying it is when you actually did that to the people that I sent forth to do my work. Then we have amplified this to, oh yeah, we have to go to the communities, and I feel that, oh, I'm overthrowing the whole 11 episodes that we have just did. But that's what it was in the context. However, we have the blessing of Adventism, and in the book Desire of Ages, Sister White does expand onto the idea. That's what it meant actually, but also the same we can apply to the people out there around us who do not know Christ. So it is applicable the way we have been applying it, but it's also about those who are ministering. And God promised, hey, if Catalina and Daniel don't rise up to minister to those who are ministering, God will supply our needs. And I like what you're saying. That's what I went back to that memory. That I don't have to worry about my clothing, my food, my shelter. God will supply that. All he's asking, hey, you know, go ahead and do something. Go ahead and minister to the needs of somebody else. And I also think about the idea that God has it all covered. I don't have to do it, but he asks us to do it because of our own benefit. When I think about he wanting me to go out there, it's like, you know, I could just not even click my fingers. I can just think about it and the whole world is, their needs are met. But I need you, Daniel. I need you to go ahead because that will help you out. That will help you shape your character. That will help you understand who I am. And I want you to go back to that image, to that likeness when I created Adam. And that's how he was. I want you to experience even a bit faintly blurry glimpse of that. Let me share with you a bit of an experience. I recall once upon a time when I was living in Brisbane, I was working for this government department. And one day I was asked by somebody, my boss, to make some safety briefs that were going to be delivered to the minister of that department at the time. And look, I never met the guy as in the minister. Never, ever. Never shook his hand. I saw him by pictures in the email correspondences and newsletters they sent us. And yet I felt somehow honored, if you want to call it, to think that this man was going to read my work, even perhaps listen to what I had to say in my report about the safety aspects of that unit. And I felt that my job was of great importance just from knowing that I was working for the most important guy of that department just below the Premier of Queensland. Even though I was a very small worker within a massive organization machinery, I just felt like that. And so as I was thinking of that, I just think about this. How should I feel? Just at the practical level. How should I feel? How should I behave based on the knowledge that I have that I am privileged to have God wanting me to do some work for Him? And you know, as I was thinking of that, I thought, oh, Daniel, maybe you should put that in your professional resume, you know, worker for God or something like that.
And that, I think, Daniel, that's really important. And I want to encourage the listeners, like, I know people can get very discouraged because they're like, oh, but I couldn't have a podcast. I just don't have that confidence, or I couldn't, be a preacher. God has called us to a ministry just because we breathe. It's not because He has given us some supernatural gift that, we're able to run an evangelistic series, or we're able to network with people we don't know from the community. God has called us to minister in so many opportunities just with our interaction with people every day. And I think sometimes when we feel that ministry or reaching out to people has to be like this specific kind of role, I think that's when we are limited in terms of how we can share our faith, because then we think, oh, well, I don't have a podcast. I have nothing to share, or no church has invited me to preach. I have nothing to share. Like, when we make our spirituality and sharing our faith practical every day, find a way every day to witness, to be active in the ministry of who you are, I think that will strengthen your faith, and it will strengthen your desire to be in a ministry, and God will provide opportunities, and sometimes He won't. Sometimes that's not what He has called you to, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're less of an Adventist or less of a Christian because you don't have a ministry, so to speak. So yeah, I would really encourage that, like you said, like wherever you are, that you have been given a ministry and you've been given an opportunity to be a representative of the gospel and of the God of creation.
For sure. Absolutely. Now, in whatever capacity you represent Christ, in the ministries, as Kathleen is saying, we all have something to do. Sometimes it can get heavy. It doesn't matter what it is. So I would like us to speak about this idea. Let us speak about the blessing of being in ministry, as well as the hardship this might bring to the emotional and physical well-being as well. Let me share with you a quote from, again, the book My Life Today, in page 230. It says, "The tender sympathies of our Savior were aroused for the fallen and suffering humanity. If you will be His followers, you must cultivate compassion and sympathy. Indifference to the human woes must be placed to lively interest in the sufferings of others." So what Sister Christ is saying, sometimes we might feel indifferent about people's suffering. And she's saying, be intentional to change that, to flip it around and to try and be interested in the suffering, and that can be done practically. So we have been called to be sympathetic and compassionate, and we can do all that at some point in time. And this is the thing. We can have the most consecrated of lives. You can be a prophet if you may. And a point comes when we get burnt out. Have you ever come to a point that you have experienced ministry fatigue as such? If you have, how did you know you were there? Or if you haven't, how do you maintain such a strength and stoically push through without being burnt out? Because some people have said, no, I've never been. And that's okay. Everybody to their own. I wonder if they're just burning over the burning. But, what is your experience?
I have personally never burnt out.
Okay.
If anything, I get so overwhelmed because there's so many things I want to do.
Okay.
But I don't have the time.
Okay.
If I could add more to my list, I would, but I just don't have the time. And of recent times, I've stepped back a little bit from ministry, but it has only been because God has really impressed on me that I need to spend time with my girls, with my daughters. From people that I have experienced burnout, I think sometimes, depending on their personality, how they deal with stress, how they deal with a lot of pressure. I worked in an industry where, we work to ridiculous deadlines. We would often work, 12-hour days leading up to, an installation or to a construction of a building. So I've always been able to manage pressure really well and last minute kind of pressure, because sometimes we would have to change plans overnight before construction started the next day. So you just had to learn to deal with that pressure. So I think it depends on personality as to whether you burn out or not. And it's not a bad thing. And it's not something that, you're like, oh, well, maybe you're just not spiritual enough. It really comes down to personality, I believe. And I think if you are the type of person who does burn out, then the best thing to do is to know your limits and to set your boundaries and to just really pray about, okay, there's 5 things that people want me to work on. God, I can't handle 5 things. What are the things that you desire me to be involved in and investing my time in? And whether it comes down to just one thing. I've found that usually there's different personalities. There are people who will do, this is me, 5 things, maybe give like 50, 60% to those 5 things. And then there's other people who will do one thing and they will give 100% to that thing.
Right.
And depending on the church that you're at, there's a lack of membership involvement, and you just have to do the 5 things and give it 50% because otherwise certain things won't exist. And then there's other churches where there's enough people to dedicate one person to each role or each task. So I think boundaries and just knowing yourself and knowing your limit. I think that's really important. And for me, it hasn't really been burnout, but I've just felt impressed that I need to invest more time in my daughters.
Right.
And as a result, that has had an impact on my ministry load. And some people may have to do the same thing. Sometimes you have to balance out your ministry load to allow time for you to spend with your family, with your spouse.
Yeah.
So
excellent. I resonate with you, and I don't perceive that I have been burnt out in the sense of being burnt out the way I know burnout is. Maybe at the clinical level, I'm clinicalizing a lot sometimes. But I have been fatigued in my ministry outputs. One of the ways I have known that I have been fatigued is when I start becoming a bit careless about what I'm doing. So I'm doing it because I have to do it. I'm doing it because it's, you've been appointed to be the elder. You have to go out there and be in the platform and do this stuff and visit and talk to people and go to the meetings, go to the board, go to the whatever you do in the church. That's within the church. And out of the church, the same thing. One day I used to live in this little town called Moranbah in Queensland up north. And there is no Seventh-day Adventist church in there. And for a couple of weeks, perhaps a month, maybe, actually. And my wife, and my children were not there with me because they were still, she was, preparing the house to sell the house in Brisbane and et cetera, et cetera. So I was there on my own. I thought, what do I do? So I started to search on the newsletters from the town. The local churches around. And I thought, well, it's a good avenue to be exposed to what is around into town and get to know the people. It's a small town, so they eventually get to know you exist anyways. So I showed up to their prayer meeting I think it was on a Tuesday evening. And I did that for a while, even after my wife came. And eventually, life kicked in and you get into a routine and you start working more, and then it was longer hours, and I literally lived behind the hospital in the campus, behind the emergency department, and sometimes they will call you at ungodly hours that you're not meant to be working, whatever, there's something always happened. And with life and living, time goes by and you get to do a lot of things, in despite of the fact that it was a smaller town. And one day I came on a Tuesday from work, maybe 7 o'clock at night, I don't know. And it's about the time, no, it was early, maybe 6, because 7 o'clock was the prayer meeting thing. And I went, I showered, put on pajamas, I went to bed, I kneeled down next to my bed to pray for good night. And as I was praying, this flash came through my mind, like the Holy Spirit telling me, you prayer meeting. Like, I don't want to go. I literally wrestled with the Lord. I don't want to go. I'm like, but you're there to be a witness and this, and I don't want to go. And that's when I realized that it was getting too much for me. Now, nevertheless to say, I wrestled with the Spirit and I went, but I didn't want to be there. And God has something prepared. Maybe I'll share that later on, because something happened on that day and I feel that maybe things were accumulating on that day. Anyhow, we'll not go there. It was a blessing, I guess. It was a great blessing, unexpected. And so I realized that it was getting too much for me. And that's how I personally identify when I'm getting, again, maybe not burnout, even though I say it was, but ministry fatigue. I was starting to be fatigued of having to do this over and over and over again. It becomes a bit meaningless. And maybe I'm losing the focus of of what we're doing here. I don't know. So the other thing though that I have found is that this ministry fatigue for me personally has been more prominent when my other areas of care also lack. So I have found that my ministry fatigue is directly proportional to my lack of self-care, if you want to call it. You know, when I was exercising, all of a sudden I'm not exercising that much. When I was eating well and more consciously, all of a sudden, you know, I pick up something on the road because it's just easiest as I'm driving home. When I am, you know, spending time with Christ in the morning, for a longer period of time, all of a sudden it reduces, it becomes just a bit of a chore and meaningless, at some level. And I realize that those aspects for me of self-care are impacted, and I feel like I don't want to do anything. All I want to do is vegetate a little bit at home. And to me, that's a sign that, you know, maybe I'm getting fatigued. And so the question for me here is, and I would like to ask you this question. I mean, you already answered a part of it anyhow, but, and I already mentioned one of the key factor here is self-care, but can you, in terms of that idea of self-care, prophylactic treatment, which is just preventative treatment, is better than having to deal with burnout. Burnout, you know, it can last for years when you really get burnt out. So can you suggest avenues of self-care that you have found beneficial to you? Despite of the fact that you have burnout, just in general, perhaps you have such a good self-care that actually that has an impact on you and your ability, apart from, of course, in conjunction with your very active personality. Is there anything that you personally have found beneficial for you to look after yourself as we're ministering to those in need?
I think it's really hard to be able to, I mean, I think everyone is so individual. Like I said, sometimes some people deal with pressure a certain way. Some people thrive off pressure. Other people just get stressed and anxious. So I think it does come down to really individual. And I think, you know, maybe if you are at the point where you feel like you're burning out, maybe just really pray about it and just take time to think about the things that actually make you feel good, make you feel calm, make you feel rested. So I think everyone has to be very individual in how they approach it. And it's very hard. I think when you're in ministry, it's very hard because when you love ministry, when you love service to your church and to people, it's very hard to step back from that. I mean, like you were saying in the last episode, like I really enjoy going out to the thrift stores. Like you give me a week of shopping at thrift stores, hence this is what happens usually when I'm in Brisbane. I don't get tired. I'm like, oh, another secondhand shop. Like, you know, I'm like trying to work out which secondhand shop I can go to.
Right.
So for when it comes to ministry, I think it's very hard to try and find that point where you're like, okay, I've ministered enough. I've served Jesus enough. So it is very hard, but I have a lot of respect. And I always tell, like when I have been at churches and pastors have taken a Sabbath off, or they've taken a Sabbath and they've gone, you know, for their Sabbath off, they've gone to the beach or they've gone away for the weekend. I always encourage them and I always affirm them on taking that time out, because I do believe at some point we need to take that time to just disconnect from even the things that we really enjoy and we really love. And it might not be because we're burning out. It may just be because we just want to be consistent in providing that opportunity to take that break, whether it's for your family or whether it's for your spouse or whether it's for yourself. I have a lot of respect, and I always affirm my pastors when they take time off. I'm like, I'm so glad you're taking time off, which they probably don't get very often because, you know, we have this idea that pastors should never rest. But I think that that's really a really unhealthy expectation and very unfair expectation to place on our ministers. So yeah, sometimes taking a break. I know I've had some weeks where I've taken a Sabbath off and I've just stayed at home. But I do want to be very cautious in suggesting that, because I know that it can become a bad cycle, that you take one Sabbath off and you take another Sabbath off and then the next, and before you know it, you're not going to church anymore. So I think if you're going to take a Sabbath off, to make it like it's a once a quarter kind of thing, or maybe once a month kind of thing, but not make it I'm going to take Sabbath off and then we'll see how I feel next week. If you can be very intentional, as in I'm going to take one Sabbath off a quarter. But yeah, sometimes just taking time away from the ministry can help to ease the pressure and just to have that downtime.
Excellent.
Yeah, I like to read.
Yeah.
So when I want to disconnect from things, I tend to read a lot.
Okay. Awesome.
But yeah, that doesn't happen very often.
That's good. It gives you more ideas of ministry, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just a pointer there. I like what you said. And if we take time off, and that's one of I did a bit of a list again, going back to my list, a very short list of the things that I have used that I'll share with you very quickly. And one of them at the top actually was taking time off, which is one of the ones that I have used in the past. I don't use it very often because I feel that, even though I sometimes do feel fatigued, I have to be there. Maybe I have a sense of responsibility that I must be there. And I have come in the past, many years back, I have judged people, and that tells a lot about myself. I judge people who take time off. Not the pastor necessarily, just people like, hey, how come people not be here at prayer meeting? Oh, because they're tired. I'm like, you know how long I have been working? I'm here too. And it's almost as if it's just a begrudging thing that, Daniel, you feel guilty because you cannot be like that. Your personality is such, you feel you're so responsible. You have to be there all the time. And I have learned not to be like that. I have learned also to take time off. But the other thing is, let us remember also that, and you mentioned it, you read and you do something. We're taking time off from the ministry for a little bit, like micro time. Take some rest depending on how much you need. We're not taking time from God. Because there is a difference between, I'm not going to church on Sabbath and I just stay bludgeoning all day at home and I forget my maker, because the Sabbath is for us to reconnect with our maker. If you're going to the beach, if you're going to the park, if you're going to the mountain, if you're going hiking, if you're walking, let us speak with God and meditate and say, Lord, this time is you and I, and no ministry, nobody around. I need you to help me. I need you to reconnect, because that's what's going to make the difference in terms of the fatigue. I also like to embrace my social supports, my friends, family, my members of my church. I enjoy doing that. That's the reason why I go and play soccer every Sunday.
I was going to say
in Vandenberg. Yeah. And we travel. I mean, for those of you who don't have a clue what we're talking about. So we literally drive an hour just to go and play soccer for about 90 minutes, maybe a little bit more. With people who are like-minded from the different churches in our region. And that's fine. That's part of my recharge. I like running, of course. And I also have done something. I haven't done it for some months. It hasn't been years. But I count my blessings in my personal journal. I have a little app that I utilize, and in the past, what I have done is I have written at least 3 good things that have happened in my day. And it's not a long thing. I don't journal like I write the stories about myself and how I feel. Some people can do that, and that's great. Actually, it's very useful. I just write 3 blessings that happened to me today. I was blessed by this, and that. And I count my blessings, and that helps me recharge and realize the purpose of my ministries and how blessed I have been in those ministries as well. Yeah. Last question, Catalina, that I have for us to reflect today. What would you say to someone who is involved in ministry and they tell you, I cannot take time off or have a break because if I am away, things are not going to run, and those who are in need, those who are vulnerable, won't be able to be ministered to. If I'm not there, nothing will happen. There might be elements of truth. No, I'm not here to judge that part. I'm rather thinking about, what do we tell somebody? Say like, no, I can't. What is your perception?
I think if they're at a point where they feel they are about to burn out, but they can't take that time off in the fear that things won't function. My first thing would be is if you burn out, those things aren't going to function either. So I think we have to be realistic that if you keep going in the same path that you have been, you're going to get to a point where you won't be able to do anything. And it'll probably be more beneficial for you to take a break now, even if nothing will function, maybe for a month. But then at least you can come back to it.
Yeah. I have come to the same conclusions, and perhaps more abruptly and with tougher love than the way you explain it. Yeah. You explain it beautifully. And I think the same, Bottom line is you won't be able to minister to those in need if you become ill, fatigue, or die. And a hard truth, and this is the tough love that I was talking about, a hard truth is that we are all replaceable. Daniel is replaceable, and God will rise up somebody to do his work because it is his work, not Daniel's work. This podcast will finish one day. Daniel will drop dead, sick, or get fatigued. I don't want to do it anymore. And somebody will come. I mean, there's so many already available, and somebody else will come and do something similar, perhaps with similar gist that God has impressed me to do. It's God's work. And let us remember that, and let us put it in His hands. I like that. Do you have an encourager for us, some ministry around the world that might be ministering to those in need as they feel impressed by the Spirit?
Yeah, I do. We're going back to America,
Okay.
United States of America. I must try and add other countries' Facebook pages so that I can be aware of what other countries are doing, but I seem to just always go between America and Australia. So it's not a battle or a war. I'm not trying to be better than you. But today we're going to Sparks Seventh-day Adventist Church in Nevada. And they just did a ministry where they collected 450 backpacks for children in need. And they gave all their donations of these backpacks and these school needs to different organizations that are working in that area to help provide resources for children that either don't have the money for that, or for whatever reason they're not able to provide for their own needs for their schooling. Equipment and stuff. So, so Sparks did that, and Jinjin did something very similar to that. So, Jinjin has done the same thing.
We did.
Yeah, so we've provided stationery supplies for for small rural schools. So,
and these are things that are so welcomed by the communities.
They so are,
because there is a need.
Yeah.
And they are in need.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. And as always, you can find examples of these and other ideas in the Adventist Committed to Serve Facebook page. So go and check it out, sign in, like it, follow it, comment, do whatever you need to do. But most importantly, embrace some of these ideas and reflect, how can I practice them? So today's weekly challenge is, again, we've been talking about this now, and you might find me boring, but I have to do it because it's important for all of us to include this idea of reflecting. What are we doing here? So sit down and prayerfully reflect what we talked about today. How is your downtime looking like? Are you running yourself to the ground? Because we've been talking here about doing ministry, but maybe some of you, I'm confident actually, I know that some of you are doing ministry. And are you running yourself to the point that your family, you, or your ministry is suffering? Is God calling you to have a break now? It could be like 1 week, 1 day, so that you don't have to call it quits later. Prayerfully think about it and execute something that God impresses you to do, so that your ministry can be as successful as God intends it to be. And remember, it is His, and He will make it to flourish. So for now, as you reflect on that, we farewell you. We look forward to next week. Catalina, is our last episode next week. I know. Of this series. It's been a great journey. It went so quick.
Yeah.
It will be the culmination of an amazing season, and yet it will be the mark of a new series on the episodes that we will be reflecting here in the Adventist Reflections podcast. So I look forward to hearing from you and your opinions and questions about what you would like us to do in the next season. In the meanwhile, I am Dr. Dancy, and today I choose to love God and speak to Him and help me to make decisions in pro of His appointed mission, even for me to look after myself. How about you?
Remember to subscribe to this podcast, like it, share it, hashtag it, comment, and find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and Tumblr as Adventist Reflections. God bless you.